How many of you have heard this morning's gospel reading before? This is a show of hands thing. Yeah? Is this familiar? Storm, boat, Jesus, Peter, doubt, sinking, calming, God rules, right? Reading it anew this week, I caught a whole bunch of new tidbits. Did you ask yourself why Jesus made the disciples get into the boat? Do you wonder why Jesus went off by himself to pray? Might you be a little curious about what he prayed about? Or what about the episode on the water itself? Why couldn't these master fishermen handle a little rough weather? Were they really thinking that a ghost was on the water? Might they have actually been fearing for their lives, thinking this could be their end? This story is pretty rich if we dig into it just a little bit. And then we have Peter. Oh, Peter, bless his heart, right? It seems like Peter is always finding himself in the stickiest of situations, isn't he? Chopping off ears and doubting Jesus and such. And here we have him endearing himself to us, his audience, like those beloved TV characters who make us grin and shake our heads and say something like, "Golly, Pete, there you go again." I think we too often get used to Peter as the butt of our biblical jokes. He's the reckless one, the foolhardy one, the bombastic one. He's the one who doesn't think things all the way through. He's prone to whims, he loses concentration easily, and occasionally suffers consequences due to losing the proverbial plot. It sounds awfully human, doesn't it? I wonder if the pieces of Peter's story that we hear throughout the New Testament aren't so much examples of faltering, but more so a look at hyper-humanity, consolidating so many of our foibles into one character. So maybe good old Pete isn't so much a punchline as he is an embodiment of what it means for imperfect people to be imperfect people alongside Jesus the Christ. We'll never measure up, but we sure are called to try. Note a few things about Peter in this narrative. Peter tells Jesus what he needs in order to feel secure in his faith, right? "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come out on the water." And Jesus says, "Come." Peter actually got out of the boat. Not the same can be said about his colleagues. Peter knew who to cry out to for rescue. "Lord, save me." And Jesus did just that. Good for you, Peter. Now, I know what y'all might be thinking, but what about his sinking? What about his doubting? He lost his faith. He lost his nerve. I will confess, for the better part of 3 decades, that's the exact slew of questions I would draw up in response to this. Peter noticed the wind. He found himself caught in the midst of the storm. He became afraid and began to sink. And this is where we tend to stop, isn't it? We act as though Peter had to be yanked up by the scruff of his neck, spluttering and gasping for air, drenched and sheepish. Gosh, shucks, it's me, Peter, done something silly again. But that's not what happens at all. Right as Peter notices that the world around him is in a tumult, as he sees that he's caught in something rough, as he's starting to sink, and note here, the sinking is passive. It's happening to Peter. It's the impact of the storm swirling around that causes a bit of faltering, doesn't it? So in response to all of these things that are happening, the blast of the sea, the gusts knocking him more off kilter, getting absolutely pelted by wave after wave, what does Peter do? He does something active. He cries out. He yells. He shouts, "Lord, save me." Lord, teacher, friend, Jesus, save me. Peter doesn't even try to save himself. Y'all notice that? He doesn't even try. As the scene around him is falling apart, as he comes to the realization that he is out of control, he says the only thing that to him feels remotely firm: Lord, save me. And we know what happens next. Jesus does just that. Talk about ask and ye shall receive, right? Peter here is doing something brave and memorable, not something foolish or dismissive in his faith in his friend Jesus. Even Jesus, when he speaks to Peter afterwards, doesn't accuse or berate him. This is audience participation. What is the first thing Jesus says to Peter? You of... Come on, let's pretend we're not Episcopalians. You of little faith. You know what Jesus doesn't say? You of no faith. He says, you of little faith. And I hate to ruin the plot here, but 3 chapters later in Matthew, we learn what a little faith as small as a mustard seed can do. It can move mountains. Peter has faith. His faith is firm and sure, even when his life is not. And what's the second thing Jesus says? Why did you doubt? We often hear this as an accusation, don't we? Peter coming up short again. Peter messing up again. Peter full of doubts again. And it doesn't seem to jive with any modicum of faith Peter may or may not have presented. Or does it? This is where the Greek might come in handy. The Greek word for doubt does not equal lack of faith. It is literally to be of two minds. Or said another way, holding two competing thoughts. Some might say cognitive dissonance. Peter didn't forsake his faith. It was there all along, and he was doing everything he could to hold on to it, which was awfully difficult to do. At the same time, he was thinking about the world in chaos around him. At the same time that he was scared. At the same time, he was on the edge down to hopelessness. And when all seemed lost to Peter, he stopped doubting. He became of one mind. He stopped trying to hold on to the thought that he had to fix the crumbling of the world and overcome his fears and walk himself back from the edge of hopelessness. He couldn't do it. Lord, save me. His faith won out in the end, and Jesus commends it. When we hear, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" I wonder if we might re-hear, "You have faith. You don't need to manage anything else alongside that faith. Don't try. Let me help you. Let me save you." Peter's story here could easily be our stories, couldn't it? When all else seems lost or ruined, when we feel the most vulnerable, the most storm-tossed, the most threatened, or the most in pain, what are we left with except the cry of our heart, "Lord, save me"? The point of this portion of Scripture is not to convey a real historical fact. The point is not to try to convince you that Jesus walked on water and Peter joined him and the wind took a chill pill. The point is that a beloved child of God cried out for peace and respite and deliverance, and God showed up. And those who witnessed it worshiped Jesus the Christ, the Son of God. What are we doing here this morning? I wonder if we're here because we know what it means to feel like Peter and his friends in the boat. I wonder if we're here because we know what it means to cry out, to plead with the God of the universe to see us and hold us. I wonder if we have witnessed God showing up, and we are here to worship. We are here to worship. Because when our faith says, "Jesus, save me," we can see a glimmer of light and feel a surge of hope and experience that hand reaching out to grab us in the storms of our lives and hear the voice of the one who saves us say, "I'm right